never seen this boost.
This is so meta, right? It's a triple boost
Come
to
on.
shoot some. Oh my
It's a
goodness,
quad
4
boost.
people!
Counter-Strike is a silly game, but among the goofiness lies a mechanical system that I think is a great example of a versatile verb. Being a first-person shooter, Counter-Strike is known for revolving around, well, shooting. But what sets it apart from its contemporaries and turns it into something much more tactical is my favorite aspect of the game, which is the various forms of utility at your disposal in the form of grenades. But what's really special about them? In February of 2017, video game design YouTuber Mark Brown released a video on what he calls versatile verbs, and since watching it, I can't play or watch a game without taking the concept into consideration and seeing how well the game applies that concept. I recommend you watch his video on the topic, and I'll link it in the description, but here's my oversimplified explanation. A versatile verb is essentially an action that is varied by how and when it is performed. These actions can be altered by things like terrain in a 3D platformer, like the way that walls affect jumping in Super Mario Odyssey, the timing of button inputs, like holding the beam button to charge it in Metroid Prime, or being used with other actions, such as flicking the analog stick back and forth while drifting to gain a short boost in Mario Kart. These mechanics not only spice up the gameplay, but they also serve to add focus to the design process. Instead of having a system of many different self-contained actions, the result can be on having a small system of interactable mechanics, and the result is less actions with more options. And this brings me back to the grenades in Counter-Strike. In CSGO, there are 5 types of utility that can be purchased by players on either team at the beginning of each round. You got flashbangs, smoke grenades, molotovs or incendiaries, HE grenades, and decoys, and they all have their own price and function. Flashbangs explode with a bright light, blinding any player who is looking in its direction. Smoke grenades are used to create a cloud that can't be seen through, blocking vision and hiding the movement of players on the other side. Molotovs and incendiaries bathe the ground in fire, heavily damaging any player caught inside. The two are slightly different in terms of armor penetration and throwing distance, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to refer to both of them as mollies. AG grenades explode and deal damage within a small radius. The closer a player is to the explosion, the more damage they will take. And finally, decoys produce the same sound as a player's gun in short bursts wherever the grenade lands, creating a player icon on the enemy's radar and causing a distraction. It seems straightforward enough, but the depth comes from both the way in which you throw the grenade and how it interacts with everything else. So how is the action of throwing a grenade a versatile one? Well, let's start with the obvious stuff. You can toss a grenade in 360 degrees around you and 180 degrees up and down, and everywhere in between. Adding gravity to the mix means the grenades you throw will descend at some point, based on the direction you decide to throw it. So height, angle, and direction alone create the possibility of countless positions that a grenade could end up in from just a stationary basic throw, and it gives you the amount of grenade variability you expect from most first-person shooters. Now I know you're thinking, dude, obviously that's how they always work. And yeah, these are mechanics that go without saying, and they're pretty much standard when using grenades in any game, but keeping this all in consideration is useful when we start looking at more variables, like the throw distance. The distance that a grenade will travel is partially dependent on how you release the grenade, and there are 3 common ways you can toss it. Left-click throws toss the grenade overhand and can cover a lot of distance. Right-click throws toss it underhand and don't send it very far. And the left right-click throw, which is done by pressing both of the buttons and releasing them at the same time, is the middle ground between the other throws. And again, these throws are also common in other FPS games, but less commonly known are the throw distances between the left and right click and the other 2 throws in CSGO. If you press down both mouse buttons, but release the right button just before the left, you end up with a slightly shortened full-length throw. And you get a slightly lengthened underhand throw if you let go of the left click before a right click. It's fair to say these aren't used all that much, but they do add an extra option outside of the basic 3, and so with just a standing throw, the grenade can be tossed in a countless number of ways. Now let's see what happens when we add movement to the equation. Any changes in position while throwing a grenade, as well as how fast you're traveling, can have a number of effects on its trajectory. Moving forward, as you might imagine, causes the grenade to travel further than if you were standing still, even if you factor out the distance you covered when winding up your throw. So if you know that you need to send a grenade a long distance across the map, giving yourself a running start can help get it where you need it to go, opening more possibilities for where you can have it end up. Something else to keep in mind is you might not want to stop to line up your grenade toss, and so you need to factor in your movement and adjust your aim to get the desired location. Moving backwards produces the opposite effect, lowering the amount of distance your utility is going to cover. You can also walk and throw, and because your walk speed is slower than your run, you end up with a distance in between the run throw and the standing throw. There's also crouch throwing, which just tosses the grenade from a lower height than the standing throw. You could also combine crouching and walking while throwing, which is not something you see often, but the option does exist if ever there was a need to use it. Moving sideways also affects the grenade, as it travels in the same direction that your character is moving. And finally, jumping gives the grenade both extra distance and height, proving useful in sending the grenade large distances. Combine these variables together and there are some crazy throws with super specific lineups that can put your grenade in a number of positions that would otherwise be impossible to reach. So the ways you can throw a grenade are quite varied, but let's take it a step further and talk about grenade-specific traits. Flashbangs and HE grenades function pretty similarly, bouncing off most surfaces and detonating a short time after release. This gives the player the opportunity to use the map to their advantage, by banking grenades to have them explode in the ideal spot. Flashbangs, for instance, are best utilized when they pop just as they enter an enemy's vision, so that they don't have time to react and turn away. With this in mind, a player can strategically bank a flashbang off of a wall, concealing it until it explodes instead of just tossing it out into the open. Decoys and smoke grenades bounce in a similar way, but unlike the previous grenades, they don't have a set timer, and will only detonate after the grenade comes to a stop. This means that smokes can be thrown a huge distance without the worry of it exploding early, making it possible to throw them from an endless amount of positions in a map. The same can't be said about mollies though. As soon as a molly touches the ground, it will drench the area in flames, but it does bounce off walls and objects. This means you can use walls to bank your throw off of, but not the ground. These also have an explosion timer that goes off if the molly doesn't make contact with the ground or other horizontal surface in time. However, if it pops in the air, unlike a flashbang, it'll explode without setting anything on fire, wasting the money spent on it. This means that mollies can't make the long trip across the map that the smokes can, meaning that they have to be used in a smaller range. And even within this loadout of utility, there's some small amount of interactivity between your grenades. While smokes normally bounce several times before hitting the ground, if they land in a blanket of fire, they will instantly stop and extinguish the molly. This not only means you can save yourself or a teammate from burning, but mollies can also be used to instantly stop a smoke where it lands, meaning it won't end up where the other team wants it to bloom. Smoke grenades, being able to conceal actions, can also hide other grenades from the other team, meaning you can surprise them by popping a flashbang inside of it, or raining HE grenades on your opponents. And this list of options is available from a small set of grenades, all of which use a simple throw mechanic to function. I know this is nothing groundbreaking, and it seems like a pretty straightforward design, akin to any other shooter with throwables, and truth be told, it is rather simple. But those are the things that fascinate me in games, those small details that go unnoticed while simultaneously enhancing the experience. And when those simple mechanics lead to interesting, varied, deep, and expressive gameplay, that makes them all the more special in my opinion. The system is so varied that I find myself going into empty maps and finding new lineups just for fun, because the options are so broad. But ultimately, it's a gameplay philosophy that I love because it's straightforward and easy to understand, but it allows for so much creativity and on-the-fly decision making. But anyway, that's my take on CSGO's versatile grenade system. Thanks for watching, and later days.